Would you risk your own life to save an entire people? What if I told you the fate of a whole nation once rested on a woman, who wasn't even allowed to speak to the king without facing death? This is not a fairy tale or a movie script. It's a real story. And it shows that when everything seems lost, God raises the most unexpected person at the right place and the perfect time to do the impossible. Today, you're going to discover the miracle that began in fear, but ended in deliverance. A journey of faith, courage, and purpose that changed the course of history. And more than that, you'll see that the same God who used Esther might be preparing you for something far greater than you ever imagined. So sit tight, because in the next few minutes, you're about to learn that silence isn't always absence. Sometimes, it's preparation. It all began with a royal scandal. Queen Vashti disobeyed a direct order from King Xerxes and was stripped of her crown before the entire court. That's when the king's officials proposed something new, to search for a replacement queen. Dozens of young women were gathered from all across the empire. Among them was an orphan named Hadassah, who carried a dangerous secret. She was Jewish. But in the palace, she went by another name, Esther, a Persian name that concealed her true identity. Esther had no title, no wealth, and no status that could make her stand out. But she had something different. Grace. That unexplainable favor that can't be bought, only carried. Even among so many candidates, she found favor in everyone's eyes. It was as if God himself had started a silent plan of redemption. While the king looked for beauty, God looked for purpose. While others saw just an orphan, God saw a queen with a hidden mission. Sometimes God chooses not the most prepared, but the most available. That's how he works behind the scenes. The preparation process lasted an entire year, 12 months of being shaped both inside and out. When the time came to meet the king, Esther didn't try to impress with extravagance. She presented herself with quiet elegance, simplicity, and inner strength. And the king chose her. A foreigner, without royal blood, now wore the crown of Persia. It looked like a political decision, but in truth, it was divine strategy. Why would God place a Jewish woman on the throne of a pagan empire? The answer was still hidden in time, but one thing was certain. When God starts something, he always finishes it. While Esther was adjusting to her new royal life, something dark was rising in the palace. Haman, a newly promoted advisor, was given outrageous power. He demanded respect, honor, and full submission. But one man refused to bow. Mordecai, Esther's cousin and guardian. That one act of resistance ignited Haman's fury. But he didn't just want revenge on one man. He devised a plan to wipe out all the Jews in the empire. Yes, an entire people marked for destruction, all because of wounded pride. Haman's hatred became law. The king, unaware of Haman's true motives, gave his approval. And just like that, the plan was signed, sealed, and spread throughout the empire. Imagine the panic as the news broke. A royal decree allowing citizens to attack, kill, and plunder the Jews on a specific day. It was a legalized genocide. Grief swept through the Jewish communities. They wept, fasted, and pleaded for help. But no one in the palace knew who Esther really was, and no one had access to the king, except her. Mordecai realized that Esther was the only one who could stop this. But there was a huge risk. Appearing before the king without being summoned meant death. Not even the queen could break this rule. She had power, yes, but still lived within strict boundaries. Would she speak up or stay silent? The clock was ticking. The weight of a nation now rested on one voice. And when destiny knocks at your door, ignoring it might cost more than just your comfort. It might cost everything. When Esther learned about the decree, fear struck her heart. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was life or death. She could lose everything, even her own life. She had been trained in elegance, not in crisis. She felt unprepared. And let's be real, she was scared. That fear didn't make her weak. It made her human. The queen with a crown was still the orphan girl inside, but that fear would soon awaken something stronger. Mordecai sent her a message that shattered her hesitation. "And who knows if you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" That sentence echoed deep within her soul. It wasn't about status. It was about purpose. Suddenly, it all made sense. She wasn't placed in the palace for luxury. She was placed there for mission. And when purpose speaks louder than fear, something incredible happens. Esther found clarity. She couldn't remain silent anymore. This was her moment, not chosen by chance, but by calling. Then she made a bold decision. She asked all the Jews to fast with her for 3 days. No food, no water, just faith. A spiritual act that stirred the heavens. A silent cry with powerful echoes. At the end of the fast, Esther rose, put on her royal robes, and said, "If I perish, I perish." That wasn't giving up. It was surrender. A woman who puts her life on the line for something bigger than herself is unstoppable. And now, all eyes were on her next move. With her heart pounding like a war drum, Esther walked through the palace halls. Every step could be her last. The king was on his throne, surrounded by guards. He hadn't summoned her. One wrong move, and she'd be executed. But something miraculous happened. The moment Xerxes saw Esther, he smiled. He held out his golden scepter, a sign that she was welcome. In one gesture, the queen was spared. Deliverance had begun, but the battle wasn't over yet. Esther didn't rush. She didn't beg. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet. Yes, a banquet. Because sometimes wisdom means knowing when to speak and when to wait. Esther wasn't reacting emotionally. She was playing spiritual chess. Every move was strategic. At the first banquet, she still said nothing. She simply invited them again for a second banquet. She was preparing the stage for the right moment, the moment when truth would be unstoppable. Meanwhile, something else was happening. That night, the king couldn't sleep. He asked for the royal records to be read to him. And guess what part they read? The story of how Mordecai had once saved the king's life. Coincidence? Not a chance. God was moving pieces behind the curtain. The king ordered Mordecai to be honored. And Haman, yes, Haman, was the one forced to lead that celebration. The same man who wanted him dead. And now, the second banquet was just hours away. At the second banquet, the king once again asked what Esther truly wanted. And this time, she revealed everything. With firm and humble words, she said, "Spare my life and the life of my people. We have been sold to destruction." The king was shocked. He asked, "Who would do such a thing?" And Esther pointed directly. "The adversary is this vile Haman." The room froze. The mask came off. The truth was out in the open. And it hit hard. The king, furious, stormed out. Haman, terrified, begged for mercy. But when the king returned and saw Haman too close to the queen, he took it as an offense. Judgment was immediate. Haman was executed on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. Justice had a name. God didn't just expose evil. He flipped the script. The very tool of death became the symbol of victory. Esther, once the hidden orphan, was now a national intercessor. She had stepped into her destiny. But there was still one problem. The original decree couldn't be revoked. So Esther asked for a new one, a law that gave the Jews the right to defend themselves. And on the day of battle, the Jews stood strong and won. What was meant for destruction became a celebration. That day is still remembered in the Jewish feast of Purim. And it all started because one woman decided she would not remain silent. How many times have you asked yourself, why am I here? Maybe you're not in that job, that city, or that situation by accident. Maybe God placed you there, not for your comfort, but for your calling. Esther wasn't the most powerful, but she was the most willing. And that's all God needed to create a miracle that saved a nation. So now I ask you, have you ever had to act in courage even while afraid? What did this story teach you? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if this message touched you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. There's a lot more coming. Stories that will inspire, challenge, and awaken your faith. And don't go just yet. Another powerful video is on your screen right now. Click it, and keep diving deeper into the stories that change lives.